Copyright disclaimer. Under Section 107 of Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news report, technicking, scholarship, and research. What I'm trying to say is, this video 100% falls under fair use. If you're a fan of any of the movies here, please consider watching them through legal means. Hello, my good people. It's spooky month, so I figured I'd do something for Halloween. Now, there's a type of film which is often overlooked due to mixing two genres that are basically opposites: horror and comedy. While there's definitely some poorly written and pointlessly dumb movies in this genre, there's actually some that are legitimately funny, scary, thrilling, and sometimes even kind of smart. Now, the rules are simple. The movie has to be both in the comedy and horror genre, and, you know, I gotta like them. Also, I can only put one movie per series on here, for the sake of variety. Also, I have to say, I am a fan of Ghostbusters. The first one is awesome, the second one to me is a pretty good follow-up, and who could forget— not that one! But I consider them more fantasy comedies with some mild horror elements. Same with movies like Beetlejuice and The Addams Family. Even though they all had some moments that were kinda creepy to watch as a kid. They're all good movies though. Also, no animated movies, since there's enough Halloween-themed animated films to make its own list. Anyways, on to the list. Let's-a go. Idle Hands. Yeah, it's an entire movie about a young man's right hand that gets possessed and eventually gets loose and goes on a rampage. Yeah, it's a pretty ridiculous movie, but it's a ton of goofy, mindless fun, and sometimes that's all you really need. It has a dumb premise, but does the best it can with it. And yeah, the humor, while not super intelligent or smart, will likely get a few laughs out of you. It's dumb, but it knows it's dumb. The main character's friends died, but they didn't move on because light was just so far that they remained on Earth. Yeah, it's one of those kind of films. One that makes fun of itself, but I'll be honest and say it could technically be a bad movie. But I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy its dumbness. Though when it comes to stuff that's legitimately and unironically praiseworthy, I gotta hand it to Devon Siwa. He does a surprisingly good job at making it seem like his hand is possessed. Also, his character, while not deep or anything like that, is likable, and I do kind of relate to him since he's a guy who'd rather chill out and be lazy and watch cartoons all day than work. Hehehe. Another legit good thing about this movie is the fact that, more than other movies on this list, it really does feel Halloween-y, with not only the fact that it takes place around Halloween, but with the color scheme and all the decorations, as well as having the final act take place during a Halloween dance party. Also, if you're into gore, there's enough to keep you satisfied, though it's not as gory as most horror films nowadays. Another thing is that, well, Molly the love interest is pretty nice if I do say so myself. I mean, I'm glad I watched this on Blu-ray. I know that this movie isn't going to appeal to everybody, and it could technically be seen as a bad movie, but to me it's one of those so bad it's good, guilty pleasure films, and sometimes that's all I really need. It's campy, it's dumb, and sometimes it's downright logic-defying, but I can't help but have this big dumb smile on my face every time I watch it. And if you have friends over and you just want to laugh, I'd recommend you get your hands on this one. Special thanks to Dead Meat, the YouTube channel, for introducing this film to me. Tremors, a comedy, horror, western, science fiction, action, thriller flick about giant mutant worms. Yeah, that's a sentence you never thought you'd hear, I bet. Set in a small town in the desert, bizarre large worm-like creatures that bury through the sand and drag people under for feeding. The way the movie builds tension with how there'll be scenes with the humans discussing how to stop the beasts, and how safe spots, inside, on boulders, etc., could be attacked, and sand is off limits if you want to live. Makes the movie kind of feel like a campier, wormier Jaws. Even the poster is kind of similar. But with that said, I still feel like the film does enough different to be its own thing. The set pieces and locations give it a much different feel, the pole vaulting being my favorite set piece, and of course the creatures itself having a much different appearance and its backstory is a mystery. The characters, while not deep or super unique, hey, that rhymed, are distinctive enough from one another and are likable enough for you to want them to come out alive. Also, the actors do a pretty good job portraying them. Overall, Tremors is a movie you'll dig into. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Yeah, it's another cult film that is honestly somewhat better than you might expect. Sure, it's not going to win any Oscars, but I really don't give a crap about the Oscars anymore. But it's more creative, funny, and exciting than you might expect. I honestly expected this to be one of those so bad it's good kind of films, but it's actually so good it's good. The aliens in this film not only resemble clowns, but their way of life and weaponry is based in clown culture. Their spaceship looks like a tent, they summon shadow puppets to eat people, they have the classic clown car, and their ray guns trap people in cotton candy cocoons, who they then drink the blood from, using silly straws. Yeah, the filmmakers really took advantage of the whole clown theme, with the set designs and creatures. The clowns are some of the best alien invaders in films with their unique designs that are both creepy and funny, and how each of the clowns has different appearance and even act and behave differently, with Shorty, this guy, being my favorite. Even with all the camp, the movie does have legit dark moments that, while not super bloody, does kind of push the boundaries of a PG-13 rating. Also, it has to be said, the theme song for this movie slaps. Heck, the whole soundtrack is pretty good. Although I do enjoy this movie, I'll admit it does have some problems. Even for a movie that's deliberately stupid, the human characters are boring. Yeah, it's kinda hard to remember any of their names or what they're supposed to be like personality-wise, which is a big flaw. I mean, a good amount of the movie's fanbase roots for the clowns, even though they don't really have a reason to invade this town outside of they like eating people. At least they aren't bland and are memorable. But that aside, Killer Clowns is a deliberately dumb film that has fun with its premise. Quit clowning around and watch it for yourself. Bride of Chucky. Now here's an odd one. The original Child's Play films were supposed to be straight horror films, but then they realized that the movies were getting more and more goofy, so they decided to take advantage of that and make it self-aware. And honestly, I prefer this more comical take on the concept. I mean, come on, it's a killer doll. He's an R-rated Muppet, so the movie takes a more tongue-in-cheek approach. Anyways, while this film isn't going to appeal to everyone, if it's for you, you'll enjoy it. It's a road trip movie that has lots of camp and creative kills, but it also introduces a new character in the series, Tiffany, who's a good foil to Chucky. She's clearly the lesser of the two evils, even though they're both evil possessed dolls, and her more ditzy and calm personality, yet still sadistic, contrasts well with Chucky's more insane and simple-minded characteristics, and she does bring out a more caring side of the Chuck. Also, her relationship with Chucky is actually funny, especially when they start to bicker. Also, it's a good switch up to change the goal of Chucky, and have a road trip film as opposed to another chase after a soul victim. Also, it's kinda cool to see what Chucky likes to do outside of slaughter, though his love of Swedish meatballs and rock music isn't enough to satisfy his thirst for murder. And you have to give him some credit. Even though he's evil, he does seem to care about his girlfriend and doesn't physically abuse her, though he's still not a great boyfriend. Something that deserves praise is the doll effects, using a combination of animatronics, puppets, and in some parts, short people in costumes. No CGI needed. Not that I have anything against CGI. The puppets look both funny and creepy at the same time, and the scars add to the whole Frankenstein parallels the film was going for. One thing I don't like is the human couple. Sure, I understand the filmmakers probably wanted some more sympathetic characters, since it's easier to relate to normal humans than killer toys. But come on, these two are not only not interesting, but they come off as kinda douches at times, since they refuse to trust each other. And there are a few human characters in this movie who could have been a better human protagonist, like David, who isn't in the movie much, but he does seem like a lot more of an interesting character. And heck, having a gay protagonist in a 90s movie would have been a pretty daring move. He could have been a better human to focus on. But overall, Bride of Chucky is a campy, romantic horror comedy road trip that will have you in stitches. Get it? Because of his scars that he gets? Freaky. It's a body swap dark comedy with gore, well-written characters, and legit suspense. What works about this movie is that it takes a concept that's been done a lot and does a whole new spin on it, usually with body swap stories. The point is that the characters learn to appreciate each other more by walking a mile in their shoes. However, in this case, the butcher purposely stole our protagonist's body and is doing bad things in it, which gives off an Invasion of the Body Snatchers vibe, and Millie has to get her body back. But she still does go through an arc on growing a spine after being pushed around and bullied for so long, since being in a bigger man's body allows her to be physically stronger, and after everything she goes through in one day, it's satisfying. The other characters are pretty good as well. Her friends do add some humor to the film, and her family members, her mom and older sister, are indeed good side characters who add some heart. Case in point, there's a scene where, due to being inside somebody else's body, she's able to talk with her mom more directly about the loss of her father, and what do you know? Characters who are not only sympathetic, but have depth in a slasher movie. Also, while there's plenty of humor, this is a comedy as well after all, the movie is pretty good with its thrills and chills. Let me say, if you're sensitive to gore, you might not want to watch this film, as some of the murders the butcher inflicts upon his victims are pretty gory and brutal. Yeah, unlike the creator of this movie's previous film, which I'll get to later, this one doesn't even try to earn a PG-13 rating. And the suspense is pretty great, as our heroes have 24 hours to switch back, and the killer doesn't want to give Millie her body back, as he's getting away with a lot of murder while he's in hers. I'd say the humor is also pretty good. And a lot of it comes from seeing Vince Vaughn act like an awkward teenager, which did get me to chuckle. Though I'll admit, when he's in his true body, it's kinda hard to take him seriously, since it's a mass murderer played by Vince Vaughn. Also, I like how the villain has a fashion sense, since he dresses his newfound mortal body in a way that gains the attention of all the boys in school, including those who previously bullied Millie. While the movie is meant to be more darkly comical and messed up, there is still heart and even occasionally good messages. Freaky. It's a freaking good time. Army of Darkness, a medieval action fantasy with wicked humor and creepy monsters. What can I say about this film? Well, for starters, the creativity and surrealism is admirable. Like, what other film can you think of that has the main character fight miniature versions of himself that came out of a shattered mirror? Or have a jousting car? Not only that, but the story is both bizarre and humorous. In short, it's about a guy who's trapped in the medieval times, just trying to get back to his time period, while getting caught up with protecting a village from an army of evil undead creatures, as well as an evil version of himself that spawned out of his body. Yeah, it's one of those type of movies. Anyways, the humor is quirky, the movie has a more adventurous feel than the previous movies. Yeah, it's a sequel to Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, believe it or not. And Bruce Campbell does a great job portraying Ash. Yeah, he's definitely a great character and is a lot more defined than the first films. Overall, Army of Darkness is a groovy time. Oh, and one more thing. This film actually has two endings. The more upbeat ending, and the original downer ending. I definitely prefer the happy ending because trust me, after all the crap Ash went through in all three movies, he deserves for something to go right in his life. Little Shop of Horrors. A musical romantic horror film with a sense of humor and a flesh-eating plant. Out of all the movies on this list, this one is probably the least horror-like, but it has enough of the elements that it qualifies. After all, if the movie took itself more seriously, it would honestly be pretty screwed up. I mean, it is about a man whose plant demands human flesh. Now, what I like about The Little Shop is that the story is simple yet has layers. It's basically a nice guy being led to do horrible things due to the plant, who has helped making his plant shop popular and possibly getting his crush to notice him. The problem being the plant needs to eat human flesh. Well, it's a pretty dark concept when one thinks about it, but its tone is comical, not gonna lie. Out of all the movies on this list, this one's probably the least scary. And the whole thing feels like a mix between 1950s horror and Broadway musical theater. And it has great songs, and that's right, it's a musical. The songs help a lot with things. They add character and style to the film, and have that Broadway-type feel to them. The characters are also pretty enjoyable as well, and their actors do a great job. Our main character, Seymour, well, he does kill in order to feed the plant. Granted, he does kill somebody who probably deserves it. Is sympathetic enough due to wanting nothing more in life than to leave his crappy old town, and truly caring about his love interest and wanting her to leave her toxic relationship with her abusive boyfriend. But at the same time isn't sure if she deserves someone like him. The characters all have their charm and good musical numbers, but the best character in the movie is probably Audrey too. Yes, he named it after the girl he likes. Not only is this plant a unique villain who has an attitude, a trash talker, and an unquenchable hunger for human, but look at the puppetry on him. The vines that act like tentacles, the handcrafted leaves that look like real leaves, and the fact that he's very expressive despite having only a mouth. One thing that should be noted is that the movie has two endings. Spoilers ahead. One, the theatrical ending, and the ending most commonly seen, where our heroes destroy Andre 2 and get married. Happy ending. And the original ending where Andre 2 wins, then multiplies and his offspring are sold off across the world, then they all become giant and take over the earth. When it comes to which ending is better, well, I actually surprisingly like both endings. I do prefer the happier ending, since it feels more satisfying due to me actually wanting Seymour to end up with Andre, especially after how much he truly cares for her. though the alternative ending is pretty creative. It has great practical effects, and Andre 2 getting a victory isn't the worst thing, since at the end of the day, he's just hungry. Overall, the movie is both sinister and lighthearted, has great sets and practical effects, a cast of memorable characters, and an awesome soundtrack. Little Shop of Horrors will have you hungry for more. Happy Death Day. What happens when you take the time loop formula and mix it with the masked slasher film genre? You get this film, a murder mystery where the murder victim is the one who has to solve the mystery of who keeps killing her. What works about this movie is that it takes the formula that's been used in these kind of films, but adds a darkly comical new spin to it. Someone in a mask keeps killing her and she can't escape, so she sets out to find out who this person is, so she can make it to the next day. Also, since she hasn't been the nicest girl on the campus, there's a lot of suspects. The movie has a style of its own, despite taking influence from other films like Scream and so forth. It's kinda hard to explain, but the style of this film feels tongue-in-cheek while also being dark and sinister and kinda screwed up. While some might be disappointed by the fact that it doesn't have a whole lot of blood or gore, since the filmmakers decided against having an R rating and aimed for a PG-13 rating, I'll say that it more than makes up for it with its mostly good sense of humor, its suspenseful moments and set pieces, and its strongly written characters. The set pieces help keep the movie from becoming too repetitive, since we have our heroine spying on suspects of hers, being chased in a parking garage and a hospital, using the resetting of the day ability to her advantage at one point, etc. If you're wondering, yeah, she does carry over damage. Also, like I said, this film has surprisingly well-written characters. We have some characters who are more there for comedy, like Ryan, and those who do help with the overall character building, like her dad, her friends, her love interest, and so forth. And a villain who's somewhat threatening, and has a unique mask that looks both distinctive and creepy for this film. But with that being said, our main character Tree, short for Teresa, is one of the best protagonists in a slasher film. What's great about her is that unlike a lot of other characters in the genre, she actually has a character arc, and an actual distinguishable personality. Sassy is one of her traits. Due to realizing how many enemies she's made, and someone is still willing to help her, and took care of her while she was passed out at a party, she realizes the errors of her way, and Tree learns to become a better person and move on from the death of her mother, which happened sometime before the film. Also, yeah, the actress who plays her does a great job, and she's pretty cute. One thing worth pointing out is that if you think about it, this movie perfectly subverts tropes associated with the genre, since Tree in the beginning acts like a typical slasher victim to get killed first, and she kinda does in a way. But then she's the main protagonist of the story, and we realize she just needed a chance to change, and getting killed multiple times really brings out the best in people. At first you might think she deserves this nightmare, but by the end you'll root for her to get out of this alive and in one piece. With all that, Happy Death Day is a movie you might want to watch again and again and again and again. Get it? Time loop? Also, there is a follow-up, revolving around different universes, and we even get to meet Tree's mother. It's a great sequel, but only one movie per series. Also, Jessica Roth still kills it as Tree. Gremlins 2, The New Batch. Now, if you watched my top 10 sequels that are better than the original, you might recall me putting this as an honorable mention, saying that I have another video I could talk more about in it. And this is that video. Don't get me wrong, the first Gremlins is a great time, and a classic for those who want a different kind of Christmas movie. However, the sequel, while lighter on scares, is an improvement in a lot of ways. For starters, the puppetry and animatronics are amazing. Anyone who says practical effects are a thing of the past need to see this or the first movie, as not only do these effects still look great today, but these effects surpass certain CGI films of today. I mean, it makes sense since there's actually something in front of the camera, and as such looks more like an actual creature. Now don't get me wrong, I think CGI can look good, and is a useful tool for helping bring stuff to life that would be impossible without modern day computers, but damn, when done properly, practical effects can be great. And here, due to the different potions affecting the gremlins, we get a variety of different types of them, and some of them are pretty creative. The story, while kind of similar to the first, but now taking place in a large building where all kinds of things are going on, which leads to more scenarios and humorous moments like them crashing a party, invading a cooking show, and, while this technically isn't part of the main setting, they even override the movie at one point. The film is more self-aware as well, with self-parody jokes about some of the plot holes from the first one, i.e. the don't feed them after midnight rule, The new Gremlins and Mogwai are cool, and Brain Gremlin is pretty funny. The jokes are more plentiful, and while the film favors humor over horror, it still has some good creepy moments with the spider gremlin and the cocoons hatching. Surprised neither of these movies scared me as a kid. But one thing I really like about this film is Gizmo's storyline. I'm not going to explain the full thing, but let's just say after losing his master, being forced into a laboratory, though he does escape shortly, and being bullied by the other gremlins yet again, it's really satisfying to have him take a Rambo influence and eventually fight back, becoming the most adorable badass ever. I'll admit the first one does some things better, like the better handling of human characters, more legit scares, and being a Christmas movie that feels right to watch at any time of year. Don't get me wrong, if it weren't for the one film per series rule, it would definitely be on the list, but I still like this one slightly more. Gremlins 2. Watch it, but not after midnight, because you'll be tired and you probably have work or school to do or something. Before we get to number 1, here are a few honorable mentions. Zombieland. It's entertaining and funny, and does have some good character moments and awesome moments, but in terms of zombie comedies, there's one I preferred more. The Don't Hug Me I'm Scared series, a collection of short films that start out innocent, then become dark and twisted. They're all pretty hilarious and screwed up, but short films don't really count for these kind of lists. Gremlins and Happy Death Day to You. Both great films, just can't be on this list for the one series rule. And last but not least, we have the films I've heard are good, but I haven't seen yet. Rocky Picture Horror Show, What We Do in the Shadows, and Fresh. There's a few other movies I could have honorably mentioned, but I'll save that for if I return to this subject. Anyways, on to number 1. Shaun of the Dead. It's a rom-com romantic comedy with zombies, and it's a well-written movie that keeps laugh and chills coming. This video is getting kind of long, so I'll try to keep it brief, but I'll praise what I can. All the characters are great. Shaun himself is a great protagonist who's funny, lovable, and even sympathetic with what he has to go through in this movie, and his friend Ed is pretty funny as well. Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are definitely a good comedic duo, and this film is no exception. The jokes are actually pretty smart, and the story starts out with the characters in the beginning of the zombie apocalypse, and they're oblivious to the fact. Like, we get that one great moment where he switches through the TV and the channels string together a warning sentence. The fact that the main group comes across another group of survivors who follow the same character archetypes as them, and more. But what makes this movie amazing is how it's more than just a comedy. It's one of the few comedy horrors that manages to be kinda scary at times. I mean, the movies I previously mentioned on the list are either scary if you're under the age of 10 or 11, or if you're sensitive to gore. But this one actually has some horrifying moments, like being trapped in a pub with a swarm of zombies, or having your loved ones turned against you. Yeah, the movie can even be emotional and sad at times. Overall, the reason I decided to put this at number 1 is because it perfectly mixes horror and comedy. It might be about zombies, but it's far from brain dead. Also, the other movies in the Cornetto trilogy don't count as horror, sorry. And that's my top 10 horror comedies. I hope you enjoyed. Like I said, there's more than just these, so I might return to this topic one day, and probably include some honorable mentions on that list. Anyways, this is Jake DeBruin signing out, and have a great Halloween, everyone.